Nowadays, a watch wearer can track a separate time zone with something as affordable, as accessible, and as practical as a Casio G-Shock. But way back when, it wasn't that simple. So let's take a look at some of my favorite vintage dual time watches. It is 2:45 p.m. Let's get down to business. So I suppose an easy choice for an early dual time watch would be something like a Rolex GMT Master, which debuted in 1955 and yes, allowed you to track a separate time zone. But you might be surprised to learn that there were other early watches that tracked a separate time zone that didn't display it in GMT. So here are a few of my favorite early dual time watches that again aren't technically GMTs at all. Now the first watch is a Citizen. Now this was on the cutting edge, okay? When we're talking about functionality, this had it all. Now I'm gonna have to look at my notes for the reference number. It's JG210372X. Now, not only did this allow the wearer to track a separate time zone, this also had a digital thermometer. Now when I look at this watch, the combination of digital and analog, it reminds me of a watch that I reviewed on this channel a few years ago. It was a Casio Edifice, and it had an analog handset, also some digital displays, and it had a digital thermometer. If you're looking for some really kind of funky watches, the Quartz Crisis is definitely a place to start because you're gonna find a bunch of watches very similar to this. But let's say you're not really into the whole analog digital Quartz Crisis-y vibe and you want something a little bit more refined. I'm a big fan of this very dressy, very refined Baume & Mercier kind of vertical layout where it has two time zones stacked upon one another. I love the brushed grains on the dial. I love the Roman numerals. Very warm, very sophisticated, and very dressy. Next up, a dual time Piaget. Now, Piaget, I'm going to be making a whole episode this week about them because they have incredibly funky design language, and we're talking about taking risks. Piaget is definitely a company that is underrated in that regard. Here's a dual time watch with a horizontal display. So this isn't stacked one upon another, it's actually side by side. Now here I love the alternating Roman numerals, but I think my favorite part about this watch is how they chose to do some pretty extreme contrast here, where it has one dial being black and the other dial being a nice cool silver. And again, it just pops and it actually makes it very easy to read and distinguish between the two time zones. Now we should mention this Piaget is actually white gold. So we're moving up in price range as the episode goes on. I don't know if you noticed, but we started with a Quartz Crisis Citizen, then we moved on to a Baume & Mercier, and now we're taking a look at a white gold Piaget. Let's move up a tax bracket even further, shall we? So here we have my favorite watch on today's list, and it's a Vacheron, okay? So anything Vacheron Constantin has to be my favorite. They're easily the best, most underrated watchmaker in the Holy Trinity. I know AP and Patek get the big claims to fame, but Vacheron is far and away the best. And vintage Vacheron is even better. And these early dual time Vacherons are gorgeous. This one, again, side by side, it's just incredibly simple, very minimalist, but very tasteful. This is circa 1970. It's reference number 2088. Yellow gold case, yellow gold bracelet. Just an all-around incredible presentation from this Vacheron dual time. So the next watch on the list, I don't think is more expensive than the Vacheron, but it is kind of a wild card, and I'd argue it's rarer. I've never seen or heard of another watch like this. It's a vintage Hermes dual time wristwatch. Now, what's interesting about this is it is a vertical stack, so one on top of another, but they each have their own date window, which I've never seen before, but I've also never even heard of this Hermes dual time watch. So yeah, I don't know if it's more expensive than that Vacheron, I doubt it, but it might be more obscure for sure. Turtle wanted to come and talk about dual time watches. What do you think, Turtle? What's your favorite? Oh, okay, the one I'm wearing. Let's talk about that. Now for the keen viewer, you'll notice I'm actually wearing an early dual time watch on my wrist, and I've been wearing it the entire episode. This Movado dual time businessmen's watch. Now, this is a gorgeous horizontal display, so you are getting side by side instead of stacked. Simple stick handset. You're getting very, very interesting grain grooves on the case. Really, really cool with a nice clean border to go along with that rectangular horizontal crystal and dial. Now, one thing I really love about this watch is that groove pattern going along the case makes its way down the face of the lugs. So it's very, very interesting. No matter where you're moving your wrist, it catches the light and just sparkles in a way. Now, this specific Movado is available for sale right now at the Time Teller shop. Please use coupon code T3Live and you will save yourself a bunch of money on this piece. Trust me. So why do I find these early dual time watches so interesting, especially when we compare them to like a GMT Master? I mean, a Rolex GMT Master is definitely the more sought after. It's definitely the more valuable and expensive option. But when we're taking a look at these, there's just a little bit more intrigue. It's different, but why? Well, you'll notice a lot of these watches on today's list, well, all of them, have two crowns. Now, if that makes sense, there's two different dials, so you're going to be setting them with two different crowns. This isn't like a GMT movement where all of it is being tracked with one movement and one crown. That's right. Each one of the watches on today's list has two movements in one case. So when we're looking at this Movado, this has two 17 jewel movements operating independently from one another, and of course two different crowns and two different dials and two different handsets to go along with it. Now, my cat Turtle seems very, very interested in this topic because she keeps jumping up and wanting to share the experience. Jokes aside, this is not something you see every day, and this is kind of another chapter of my vintage watch journey, kind of exploring these different nooks and crannies and learning about some really interesting solutions to early problems, right? People did business in different areas, people traveled to different areas, and they needed a way to keep track of a separate time zone. And it's just kind of humorous to me that the watchmakers were like, you want a different time zone? Fine, we're putting another movement in there. And honestly, it's not as clunky as it sounds. You take a look at the watches on today's list, you take a look at the watch on my wrist, and it's still very refined, very elegant, very simple, and just kind of an obvious solution, right? You need two time zones, we'll put two movements in the case, you can set them each independently, boom. And that's not to say these are better than a Rolex GMT Master, it's just different. I think nowadays, with current watch collectors, when it comes to tracking a separate time zone, people have, world time options, people have GMTs, but it's fun once in a while to step back into history and take a look at what the options were way back when. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment, leave a like. If you didn't like the episode, still leave a comment, leave a dislike. Any engagement helps. And if you want to support me further, please consider shopping at the Time Teller shop. And again, this watch at the time of filming is still available, and you're not going to find one in this condition for this price anywhere else, and you'll get it even cheaper if you use this coupon code T3Live. Don't miss out because the coupon code is not going to last forever, and this watch surely is going to get scooped up pretty soon. So guys, thank you so much for all the support. I will catch you on the next one. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay blessed. I'm Jory Goodman, the Time Teller, and always remember, I didn't invent time. I just tell it.